Welcome to Adorama a voice for creators. I'm your host, Daniel Norton, and in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about working for free. I've also got some messages with some thoughts on last week's show and a great review from Charlie. This week, I want to talk about something that popped into my mind last week when I was doing the podcast, which is the classic, you can't pay your rent with exposure. And of course, this goes around and pay me and this and that. And I think that that's important. Of course, we should be paid as creators if we're creating something commercially. That being said, things are not so black and white often. And sometimes we want to work for a company or a project. Sometimes we're willing to work for less than we would normally, or sometimes for free. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the advantages of doing that, the disadvantages of it, and some experience that I've had doing that. So let's get to it. So let's start off with talking about the idea. Now, I think that the concept here is that, especially with the memes and stuff, is that, everybody's just, you've got your studio, or whatever, however you work, you've got all your gear, you've years of training, you've made a portfolio, and then some little unknown company contacts you and says, hey, can you do this photo shoot that's going to take a whole bunch of your time? And it's great exposure. Now, of course, that just seems silly and that's not going to do anything for us, right? But at the same time, when we are starting out and we're thinking, well, nobody is seeing my work anywhere, and how do I get in front of people? Sometimes those offers can seem very tempting. So I'll start off by saying you need to approach this as much as possible in a realistic manner. In other words, there's no silver bullet. There's no magic way to do things. It's not like if you do this one job, somebody will see you and next thing you know, you'll explode. Almost never will something like that happen. And even if it does, it will be very unsustainable, right? This is your going viral thing, right? You do something and it blows up. You might get a couple of the jobs from it, but if you're not ready, right? If you are not ready as an artist to achieve that level of success, it won't work for you. The thing is that building yourself up a little bit slower is often a better route, because when you finally have those successes, you're able to deal with them, right? And be consistent with it. So that's an important thing to remember, is that don't ever look at, no matter how much something is offered to you as like the magic bullet, it's almost never is. So you have to go into it realistically thinking, okay, might help me, but it's not going to change my life, or very likely not going to change my life. And when I say that, I don't mean that it won't help you. It's just that you need to use it as a springboard, right? It's a way, and it's like a door opening. It doesn't mean that you're going to shoot right up to the top, right? You're still going to navigate through the building to the elevator, get on the elevator and ride it up, right? So we're going to look at like this from a couple different points of view. My background is primarily as a fashion photographer, as I said, and one thing that you often do in fashion, or fashion photographers do when they're starting, is, for instance, shoot new models, or what they call model development. So the thing about being a fashion photographer, it's this weird thing. Obviously you need to have the skill set, you need to shoot certain ways, you need to have the light, but the models and the clothing and stuff like that make just as much of a difference, especially in the beginning. It's kind of like a rite of passage, a sign that you belong to the club, to have, agency level, as they call it, models in your book. So you could shoot everybody that you know, all your friends and stuff, and create the most amazing funky fashion images, but a lot of agencies won't even look at you unless you've got some agency models in your book. Now, of course, how do you get them in your book? That's a whole other thing, right? So a lot of times what photographers will do in those cases is they will work for the agency, creating images for the models, comp cards and websites now and books for free, effectively for exposure. You are shooting, doing what you could potentially be paid for, and they are getting effectively free images to promote their model. But you're getting this pass card now that when you show your book or you show your other images, people will be like, oh, those models are with such and such agency, you must be established, right? This is where the exposure helps you. It puts you into this certain club. Now, that being said, most of these agencies will say something like, well, okay, we, pay people to develop the models, but you'll need to do a couple of tests first. And I can tell you, both on that level and on commercial levels and pretty much every level, if you work for somebody for free, the chances of getting paid are next to none. So know that walking in. When you go to that first agency and they say that, you're not going to get paid from them ever. However, you will hopefully be able to create some amazing images with now agency level models that you can now take those images and bring them to another agency. And when they say, you're going to need to shoot a couple for free. You can say, no, I have these images here. If you don't like my work, I'll just move on. And then that's the real test, right? If they say, okay, well, move on, then all right, you're not ready. If they say, oh, okay, well, we'll give you one to try out and we'll pay you for it. This is what you want. And it takes a while, and it takes sticking to it. And the thing is that most people, this is actually down like old man yelling at the sky, but this is why a lot of photographers don't get paid for developing models, is because constantly there's a new flux of people photographing the models for free because they want to, right? People want to have good models in their books, so they're going to do this for free. This is effectively a type of exposure that is both good because it allows you to get those things for you, but bad for, we'll air quote this, the industry, right? Because now all of a sudden there's less people that can be paid to shoot the models. You can. I mean, I went through a period where that was my primary income, where some of the bigger agencies in New York City paid me to develop their models, and that it's really fun. It's a fun thing to do because you get to work with a lot of new people. And anyways, that might be a whole other thing too. But the point being here is that is a form of working for free for exposure. And in a sense, in the long run, paying your rent. Sure, if you say, I can't pay my rent with exposure, that's true. But that exposure might get you in front of the right people. The same thing is true for, magazines, right? You're shooting editorials for magazines. A lot of times the budget for those are minuscule, and a lot of photographers that shoot them don't make any money, because if they pay you the $500, whatever it is, day rate for magazine editorial, you're almost always spending that anyways on extra stuff because you want the editorial to be as good as possible. Because an editorial is almost like free advertising for you. You're in a magazine, a local magazine, a regional magazine, a national magazine with your work and your name on it. This is where these things become interesting and where we want to start to differentiate stuff. Again, going back to that original concept, some small unknown or whatever brand wants you to do some work for them. How are people going to know that you did that work? Right? If John's shoe company comes to me and says, hey, if you shoot my shoes for exposure, okay, but what's the difference between that and me just taking a pair of John's shoes and photographing them and putting them on my portfolio as is, right? As a product photographer, it doesn't do me any good, right? It's like nobody's going to see John's shoe ad and know I shot it, or especially if it's on like their website. So, okay, you've now shot for free. Maybe it's for experience. So another reason to do these kind of jobs might be because it's something that's completely out of your wheelhouse, you've never done before, and they're taking as much risk as you are. Obviously, you want to be honest with this. This is the situation where, like, maybe you know somebody, like your third cousin has got a store, and they're like, oh, I need some posters to hang in the window. And you might then say, hey, you know what? I can do that at cost or whatever, because I'm going to now have a client that I can show other clients to hopefully get more clients, and it is going to work out for me. But if you have no connection to this person, and then they're going to expect you to do the most perfect job, right? When it's your cousin and you say, I've never shot this before, if it goes south, it goes south, and they're like, okay, I'm getting it for free. That's cool, right? That's the relationship you need to establish here. It's like, I'm trying to do something, I'm creating something, and you are allowing me, effectively, you're giving me the models, or you're giving me the product, or you're giving me the situation where I can create something for my portfolio. It's a trade, right? You're not really doing it for exposure in the sense, again, like the meme, you're doing it as a trade. You want to learn how to photograph food. So you're going to this restaurant and photographing that food, and they know that the pictures might be terrible. Hopefully not. But, that's the idea, right? Is they're taking a risk on you. You're taking a risk on them. It's kind of an even playing field. Again, this is not the same as a master chef that has 6 restaurants, around the city making, money hand over fist. And they're just like, oh, this is great exposure for you. Is it? Where is my name going to be in the menu? This is what we have to do. We have to think about this like that. We've got to think, well, okay, what am I gaining from it? Again, in editorial sense, your name's on it, right? In a somebody or a small business sense, you might be learning a new trade or a new practice that you can try. So in a sense, it might be worth it, right? They're supplying, hopefully, I would say at a minimum, they're supplying the raw materials, the models, the location, stuff like that. So it's not costing you anything, and you're producing something for your portfolio. So that's another reason why it might work out for you to do something effectively for free. Okay, the reason why I might, and I have, work for free is often for some kind of charitable cause. This is another reason why we might do something. If somebody reaches out to me and it's for a good cause, and I have the time, I will often donate my time and my talents to that. And I think it's good for us to do that as people in general, whether you're a photographer or an artist, or you're just a regular person. I'm doing what's a word that can donate time to help with causes that you believe in. I think if you're doing something for charitable work, then you oftentimes they will have some kind of a budget to handle the expenses, so it's not costing you anything, but it might, and it's worth it. I've done this for many different types of charities. I'm not going to get into that now, but I don't have a problem doing that. I think that if you are the type of person that believes in certain causes, it's worthwhile for you to do that. If there's a cause that you believe in, I think that donating your time and skills is very much worthwhile. So again, we're using different words here, right? We're talking about exposure would be your name's on it. Trade would be, it's kind of a 50-50. And then we've got donating, where you're doing it because it's something you truly believe in. These are different things. And I think a lot of times people clump all that. You don't pay me, it's just in one thing, but you really can't do that. There are times that we're not going to just do stuff if we get paid, at least for most of us. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more details of how do we decide what we do and what we don't want to do. So first of all, I'm going to say that it's been my experience, and somebody will probably call in, and you guys, you can call in using the Anchor app or send me an email and tell me that, oh, no, I've had this happen. But generally speaking, if you do something for free for somebody, they will never pay you. You're seen as the free person, and you have to be ready to accept that. Same thing for low budget. Somebody comes to you and says, hey, we only have a small budget. They're never going to have a bigger budget for you. It's once you work at that budget level, you are that photographer. So, or artist or whatever, just know that it's very, very difficult to move out of that rank. But again, you might work for the discounted rate for this one advertising agency so that you can build a book of stuff. So that when you go to a different one, you can ask for your full rate. So you've got to consider that. I've had this happen multiple times in my life where like literally art directors have come back and been like, oh, we got a bigger budget. And my eyes light up like, oh, great. And then just like, so we're going to use somebody else. It's like, really? It's like, because I'm the guy that works at this price. Was earlier in my career. Now I know not to do that. Once you set your price, once you set your day rate, once you set yourself up, that's where you're at. Getting a little bit more from people might be possible. Getting a lot more is very hard. So make sure that whatever you set that initial price at, you're there. You're happy with what you're getting. So if you are doing something at a discounted rate, I mean, you can do all the tricks that they tell you to do, which is like put the full rate on the invoice and then put the discount on there and this and that. But the reality is that once somebody knows, oh, they'll do this for a third of what most photographers will, they'll only call you when they need somebody to do it for a third of that. So that all to the side, let's look at this. And something I talked about last podcast, and is a pretty common theme here, is your risk and your reward, right? What is this going to cost me? Am I investing a whole lot? Am I investing my reputation with other people? Like, am I getting other people involved? Am I getting volunteers to help me, like models or makeup artists or stylists or anybody else, crew that's helping me also for free or for discounted? And is my reputation going to be hurt with them, right, if this whole thing goes south? Is it costing me money? Do I have to go somewhere to do it? I think I've told the story here before, but I'll tell it again. I had a friend that, he lived in Pennsylvania and I live in New York City. And he was like, I would love to assist for you because, he had like a regular job, but he wanted to get into photography more. And I was like, okay, well, I have these jobs, it pays this. And I knew he was capable. So he came up, and after several times assisting, we were just having a conversation. And I was like, well, hold on, you take this train up and back every day? And he was like, yeah. And I'm like, but that costs, X amount of dollars. You're literally losing money to work for me. I'm like, I can't use you anymore. And he said, no, it's worth it for me because I'm learning so much on your set that I would do this if you didn't pay me anything. And of course I was like, no, there's no way I'm not paying you anything. And I actually was able to kind of squeeze some more money out for him the next time and get him at least to cover the train fare so he didn't lose money. But the reality is, for him, it was worth it. It was like he had a job. He didn't need the money. I didn't ask him to work for free. He was making the choice to do it. He knew that it would cost him whatever the amount of money was for the train. And that was more than what I was paying him. And I was paying him a fair assistant rate. He wasn't doing a discount rate. But in the end, it's like it was worth it, right? So he decided it costs me this. I gained this. It's worth it. You may find yourself in that situation. It might be, okay, it's going to cost me 2 days of my time and the use of my gear, wear and tear, whatever. I used to be film, right? But in the end, it's worth it because I get to do this, this, and this. I help this cause. I made some connections with certain people. I got in my work in front of certain people. Maybe it's worth it. So we've got to think about that. What does it cost us? And again, what do you gain? What am I gaining from this? Am I gaining knowledge because I'm working for somebody, like in the case of the photo assistant? Am I gaining access to people I wouldn't have had access to before? Like, let's say you get to be shooting backstage at concerts and you want to get into music photography. You might get in front of certain musicians or photograph certain musicians or meet their managers or their crew so that you can, when you approach them later for other projects, you have a connection, right? So am I getting access to people? Am I getting a good reputation? Am I getting known in the industry because I did a certain thing, something that somebody else maybe didn't do, something that's a spectacle, right? Or possibly, like in the case of magazines, whatever, am I getting my name plastered all over this thing? So I'm getting effectively an advertisement. Is it worth it? What does it cost me? What am I gaining from it? And the final thing is we have to think about, what have I got to lose? Because that is always the case. You could go into this thing saying, well, I'm doing it for free so they get what they get. But could it hurt your reputation in some way by putting you in a bad light in front of people? Or is the person that's asking you to do this well connected with other people? And will you become the cheap photographer for everybody because they tell everybody that? Or will you go and do this project and you're backstage and people are going to be aggravated because you're back there doing something, right? Like, what is this job exactly? How is it affecting me? How does it work with my reputation? How does it work with me as a person? What do I gain from this? What do I lose? What does it cost me? This is all we need to think about whenever somebody approaches us with any job. This is true even if they approach you with a job that's double your day rate. Somebody approaches you with a job that's double your day rate, but it's going to tarnish your reputation or go against what you believe morally, you lose something there, right? So we always want to factor that on every job that we ever take, but even more so in this case, in the times where we're working effectively for free. I would love to hear your stories about working for free or at a discount or things you've done to help kind of push yourself forward using exposure to kind of gain ground. If you guys got stories like that, please call in. You can leave me a message using the Anchor app. It's, again, in the show notes is a link, or you can send me an email, adamavoice@gmail.com. All right, so I got a couple of voice messages here from Jason. Jason has the Nerds RPG Variety Cast podcast. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And let's see what he has to say.
Hey Daniel, Jason here. Really enjoyed your May 30th episode. I thought you had some really great advice there about how to pick jobs and how to build your reputation. And I really appreciate you taking time to put that out there. And it sounds like you have plenty more shows in mind with all the sidebars you you mentioned you could go down. So very cool. And I'll talk to you soon. Take care. I suppose there's a temptation to work in different spheres by just setting up different web pages or different companies. But at some point, that will get linked back to you. So if you did the male bodybuilders in the tweens fashion, and they were different, you set them up under different websites or different companies. If you're big enough to be able to do that, eventually it would still come down to, and I guess if you had employees, you'd get away with that, right? A bigger company, yeah, we have a division that does this and division does that, but it is a one-person operation. Eventually, especially in today's age, that might still bite you in the butt. I don't know. A lot of food for thought there. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks, Jason. I really appreciate I guess everybody here listening and kind of the ability I have or the freedom I have to just kind of talk about what I love, which is photography and the arts and being a creator. So, this show is really great for me and I'm really enjoying it. Yeah, I think you make a good point there about a larger business, right? A larger business can get away with kind of having different divisions, if you will. I remember I worked for, when I very first moved to Florida, I worked for and these are somewhat related, but I worked for this company. God, if I can think of the name of it before I stop recording, I'll say it. Actually, what's funny is I had read their book. They wrote a book, and they were a couple who did weddings, and they also did what was popular back then, which was called like boudoir photography, which was effectively like glamour photography, where primarily females, and they would, like dress them up in, Victorian lingerie, whatever, that kind of stuff. So anyways, I worked for them for a little bit doing some wedding stuff. And it was interesting because, right, they had different divisions, right? The people that went and shot the weddings, like me, were not the same people that shot the other stuff, right? Although I'm sure that some brides crossed over and they probably had some crossover customers. You definitely could do that with a larger company. I think, though, as an individual creator, we just have to be careful, right? Because everything that we do is us, right? If I decide to work on something, I'm Daniel, right? No matter what I do, I'm me. That being said, as I mentioned, I don't think that should mean you should turn down work. You just want to make sure that you're aware of your face, if you will, right? You might do the male bodybuilders, but not put it on your website if your primary, or anywhere, if your primary work is the tweens fashion, right? You just don't show it unless somebody asks for it. And if they're asking for it, they already know you're doing it. And I don't think that really hurts, because I don't think people care. Like, I think if I went to any of the parents and was like, well, I also shoot, bodybuilding contests, I don't think they'd be like, we're not working with you. It's just when they see it juxtaposed next to the other images. So I think that's really where we have to be careful, right? We just have to think about how we're showcasing what we've got there. Just like any store is not going to put a sign of two products that really just don't, that clash, let's say, on the same sign, right? They'll put them on separate sides of the store or in different booths or whatever. The same thing as a creator. You just don't want to put that stuff all smushed together so that when somebody's looking for something very particular, they don't look and say, oh, that's not what I want. Okay, I've also got another email from Mark. He says, just finished listening to this week's edition. I get that a bad gig could have negative consequences and that thought needs to be given about accepting a job. Are you able to take this idea a little further? You haven't mentioned social media, such as Instagram, Facebook. I'd like to hear your thoughts on what to post, whether to post, how often to post. Well, that's a great topic and probably an entire episode on its own. But what I will say is what I just said to Jason is pretty much the same thing. You want to make sure that you're not looking like you don't have a consistent voice or a consistent position. You want to post things that showcase your work, obviously, but you also don't want to post something, especially if you're using it for business, you don't want to post something that is going to turn off potential customers. And I think with social, depending on the thing, right? Facebook, I don't know, maintaining a bunch of Facebooks might be a pain in the butt. Having multiple Instagrams is not a huge deal. And I've seen a lot of people that do that. They have two Instagrams and their primary one, like the business one, might be filled with their business, their portfolio. And then in their bio, they say, oh, you can see other works I do here. Again, I would be careful with that, because if you send somebody to a spot, it's the kind of thing that might make them not want to work with you for whatever reason. That might just work against you. So I would be a little bit hesitant to do that. I think you just want to be conscious of what you're doing. If it's a business account, if it's a personal account, post what you like. You are a person, right? I think that even though the sole proprietor, as it would be, or the creator, is such an interesting place to be, because we are a business, right? We're trying to be out there in the public. We're interacting with people. We want to be as open as possible so we can attract as many customers as we can get. But we also are a person, right? You have your own thoughts and beliefs, and people probably work with you because they like you as a person in the long run. They might find you because of some of your work, but in the end, they work with you because they like you. So you probably won't turn off people that are your regular clients with social posts, but you could prevent new people from finding you if you're not careful about and really strategize about what you post. I would say things that go away, like Instagram stories, are the place where you can post things that are a little bit more personal, for lack of a better word, a little more fun, shows a little personality, and your main Instagram body should represent more your commercial side or your work side. Adorama supports this podcast, and you can support them by going to adorama.com and purchasing any of your electronic, photo, video, audio gear. You can also check out adorama.com/create no matter what, where you can see all kinds of contests going on where you can win a whole bunch of gear. One of the best ways to grow a small podcast like this one is to get rated and reviewed. So if you haven't yet rated the podcast, please go down and give me a rating, 5 stars ideally, and give me a review if you have the time. And I read a review every week, so let's read one. Okay, this is from Charlie Goodday via Apple Podcasts, 5 stars. Informative and relatable. This podcast does a great job of giving real-world examples from those in-the-field moments we as photographers all have experienced. Right? I love to tell a good story, so, well, I'm not sure if they're always good, but thanks, Charlie Goodday. Yeah, I think that's how we learn, right? I remember sitting around when I was a photo assistant, on long drives to shoots or packing up a gear and just listening to the photographers talk about, what they had gone through, different stories they had. And I feel like you learn as much from that as you do from just getting the camera in front of you and shooting. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Thank you, Jason and Mark, for your messages, and Charlie for your review. If you guys would like to be part of the show, you can leave me a review, as I said, or you could leave a message using the Anchor app. The link to that is in the show notes. You could also send me an email at avoice@gmail.com. You could either type it out like Mark did, or you could attach a voice message if you want to say something that takes longer than 1 minute, which is kind of the Anchor limit. I'll talk to you soon.